I'm Kitty, and welcome to a chilling journey through the heart of New England on mine. Missing, murdered, unidentified in New England. Join me as we delve deep into the enigmatic cases that have haunted the corners of Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Buckle up, because in each episode, we'll time travel through the decade from January 1st, 2010 to December 31st, 2020. Some stories will keep you on the edge of your seat for longer, while others will be quick, tantalizing glimpses into these mysterious tales. The truth is, these cases often shroud themselves in secrecy, leaving us with only fragments to piece together. As we embark on this haunting journey, remember that all the research, storytelling, opinions, and even my inevitable blunders are mine alone. I promise to keep you in the loop with updates and corrections whenever possible. While we won't issue trigger warnings for the wounds that are a crucial part of these narratives, we will do so when it comes to sensitive topics like suicide, animal loss, domestic violence, and drug misuse, substance abuse. So stay tuned, stay curious, and let's uncover the untold stories of New England together. And with that, please join me as I tell you about 2013. July 19th, 2013. Scott Souza had been arrested several times over the years for a number of different charges, including weapons violations and being tied to a murder. Very few of the charges ever stuck, and Scott remained free most of his days. Scott was an Austin Street, New Bedford, Massachusetts resident who was found unconscious with gunshot wounds in 2011 and survived. Scott and his roommate were charged with possession and intent to distribute 14 to 15 grams of cocaine, 53 Percocet pills, 4 Valium tablets, a pound of marijuana, and possession of a loaded 40mm gun, and possessions of stolen property, also in 2011. Scott also had about $2,800 in cash. In 2012, Scott and a few other people were involved with an illegal nightclub. There was a murder at this illegal nightclub of Melvin Pina, whom Scott ID'd for police. The night of Melvin's murder, Scott said he left the premises and that the party was not being thrown by him that night, but by the people he was subletting to. 911 was called at 3:07 a.m. on July 19th, 2013 at 25 Austin Street, where Scott was discovered shot in the torso. Austin Street is in Weld Square. The charges for a case of a large capacity firearm, .40 caliber, and 17 rounds of ammunition were still pending at the time of Scott's murder. Please call 1-508-991-6300 with any information. July 20th, 2013. I will always remember your smile, laugh, jokes, and caring heart for others. If your car was messed up, Paris was the guy you would go to, said Bianca Flores, 22, who grew up in the area around Harold Street, where Paris was killed. He was a fun guy. He was a jokester. He could always make you smile. He wasn't in any gang. He just worked, fixing cars, helping out. He was a hard-working man. You could have a barbecue, and everyone would disappear at the end, except him. He'd be there to help you stack the tables and chairs. He was raised the right way. There's not much Paris couldn't build or fix. Paris Haynes was a multi-talented person with the ability to perform plumbing, electrical, general engineering, and DJing. Paris was born on July 27, 1983, a 29-year-old father of 2 with no gang ties. Paris once built a go-kart with his 8, now 18-year-old stepdaughter. His son was 5, now 15. Paris was born to John and Linda. On the morning of July 20th, 2013, Paris played ball with a friend's children, and on that evening had been DJing a party, and was planning on buying a laptop off of friends afterwards. Paris called his girlfriend, Darnice Robinson, to tell her he was on his way home. Darnice fell asleep. Hours later, she awoke, but there was no sign of Paris. That same night, 2 people were shot at 1:37 a.m. in the area of Herreshoff Street. Paris was shot after he left the poker house at 131 Harold Street, Roxbury, Mass. I turned him over, Darnice's friend Norma Norfleet said. His eyes looked just like my son's did when he was shot. I knew he was gone. Norma's son, Jamal Norfleet, was struck by bullets and killed in 2006. A reformed gangbanger, Jamil was trying to turn his young life around when he was killed only steps from where Paris's life was also cut short. Paris was at the wrong place at the wrong time. Paris was taken from the H Block neighborhood to Brigham and Women's Hospital, where he was pronounced deceased. The other person was located at Holworthy Street and transported to Beth Israel Hospital and survived their injuries. The men who shot and killed Paris were described as 2 black males who jumped out of a gray Honda, shot the 2 men, jumped back in, and drove away. While violent, Paris's murder lacked the same gruesome details as the young woman Amy Lord, who was murdered the same day as Paris and was covered in the news less than Amy's murder, and this can be partly attributed to Paris's murder taking place in a community where people have come to expect such crimes. It's still bullshit if you ask me, though. Paris is buried in Oak Lawn Cemetery. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS. July 27th, 2013. Sharon L. Paul was 53 when she literally vanished from the Marriott Hotel in Stamford, Connecticut on July 27th, 2013. Sharon is 5 foot 2 inches and about 130 pounds. Sharon has brown hair, brown eyes, was wearing shorts and a t-shirt. There's literally no other information about this woman or this case. If you have anything to add, please call 1-203-977-4921. August 23rd, 2013. 51-year-old fisherman John W. Fitzy Fitzgerald was much like Billy Mack of our previous case, lost to his beloved sea, this time off the coast of Nantucket, Massachusetts. Born in Needham on August 24th, 1961, to Eleanor and John Fitzgerald, John was one of 9 children. John possessed a wry sense of humor, was kind and quirky, and had 5 children: Brian, Matthew, Thomas, Janet, and Molly. John was a hard worker who lived in both Nantucket, Massachusetts, and Big Pine, Florida. The other case that we have for the month of August 2013 is that of John W. Dogman Fitzgerald, who is deceased and missing. Many longtime Needham residents will never forget John's appearance in the town's annual 4th of July parade. John, who was in elementary school, dressed as an organ grinder for the popular Horribles walk. On his shoulder was the family's pet spider monkey, George. Halfway through the parade, George broke his tether and scampered up a nearby telephone pole, leaving John in tears and halting the parade until the Needham Fire Department could dispatch the ladder truck and a firefighter to retrieve the wayward monkey. John was last seen on a private recreational fishing vessel, wearing white shorts and a blue t-shirt. John has short brown hair and blue eyes, quick wit, and a pirate's smile. I will forever have a smile on my face when I think of John Fitzgerald. His silly, dry, quick wit brought me to my knees often and in seconds. He was hilarious, a storyteller like no other. He was the definition of a character. Hardest worker I ever knew. A true Irishman right down to his bones. He will be greatly missed, but never forgotten. John enjoyed wrestling in high school, and swimming, and hunting, and bow hunting, fishing, skiing, snowmobiling. Essentially, if it was outdoorsies, he was doing it. John was also an animal lover with a menagerie of pets, including dogs, cats, hedgehogs, guinea pigs, iguanas, and a special love for chinchillas due to his youngest daughter, Molly. John owned his own business, Fitzgerald Masonry, which later turned into Fitzgerald and Sons Masonry when his sons expressed interest in the family business. John's kindness far exceeding your average, his no-fear scrappiness, his unequivocally hard-working hands, and a bloodline flooding with humor made John an absolute privilege to simply know. If you come across any remains in the sea, please call 1-800-494-TIPS. August 22nd, 2013. William Billy Mack McIntyre is deceased and missing. McIntyre, 51, partied harder, fished longer, and landed more monsters, often in second-rate boats, than almost anyone else he knew. And he knew everyone worth knowing in this seaside town, and was a boisterous, gleeful presence in the lives of nearly all of them. There was this one time a hurricane was rolling through, and Billy Mack went to the aid of a new and local restaurant, helped them bunker down, and essentially saved the place. In return, the restaurant stayed open for the fishermen of the community so they could keep watch over their boats as the storm passed through. Billy Mack was a local celebrity. Billy Mack loved his friends and family, was an avid lobsterman who spent summers with his dad lobstering, harpooning, and hand-reeling blue tuna. Billy Mack was described as fearless. Nothing scared him. He was an adventurer and a lover of life. Sure, he gained some weight and lost some hair, but the evolution seemed to end there. Except he had a new truck. Billy Mack was said to have loved the finer things in life. Wine, women, weed, etc. Worked harder, played harder. Billy Mack's reputation preceded him. Tim Levesque and Billy Mack were work friends, turned best friends, over a bond of shared labor, and had met up with 3 women the night Billy's life came to an end. The 5 drank and bar hopped, and while flirting, laughing, and conquering a language barrier, Billy Mack had the idea to take the group on a night boat ride. The 4 others agreed. The 5 rowed out to the Bell Buoy, about a mile offshore, where Billy decided it was time for a swim. Billy stripped down to his boxers and jumped into the cold August ocean from the port side gunwale, one of the women following close behind. Both people paddling in the ocean contently. When 30 seconds went by, Tim heard screams of, "I can't swim!" from the other side of the boat in the dark waters. Shortly after, Billy Mack said he would help Stephanie, one of the women from the bar, swim back to the boat. And seconds after that, friends saw Billy Mack floating face down 15 to 20 feet away. Without hesitation, Tim tied a rope around himself and dived into the waters desperately, trying to pull Billy Mack back aboard, but was unsuccessful. The rope that Tim tied to himself had become entangled in the propeller, tightening with every tug of Billy Mack's body in a desperate attempt to bring him home. Tim and Billy Mack were friends to the end. I looked down at Billy and I told him, "I'm sorry, buddy, but I gotta let you go." "I had to make the toughest decision of my life," said Tim. Tim flopped back onto the deck exhausted, ears ringing, his nerves on fire from exertion. His head throbbed from impacting the hull and had a cut opened up the bridge of his nose. Shock was setting in as Tim called for help, turned the boat around, and began to search desperately for Billy Mack. Love your friends and family to the fullest and tell them, because you never know when they may be gone, said Tim Levesque. That fateful night had been one of celebrating life and living for the day. Billy Mack, an Algonquin, Maine native, standing at 6 feet, 225 pounds, with brown hair, ventured to take his companions to Perkins Cove in Maine. Billy Mack was a fishing legend, one whose quiet death was a jarring end to a life lived at full volume. Designated unofficial mayor, Billy Mack was a grinning, fun-loving man with a penchant for making fast friends wherever he went. If you find any remains in the sea in Maine, please call 1-207-633-2661. September 5th, 2013. They took you away from us because of what you wore. Walter D. White, Jr. was a 19-year-old kid born on April 13th, 1994. Walter was born in Liberia to Walter D. White and Clara Kine. Walter was brother to Paul, Alvin, Prince, Bartholomew, Zachariah, Rachel, and Rose. Walter was found shot in the head and pronounced deceased at 502 Norfolk Street, Mattapan, Mass. Someone shot Walter to death in the vicinity of Norfolk and Clarkwood Streets. In the aftermath of Walter's murder, people were running their mouths about Walter and his murder, saying that he had it coming, and no witnesses came forward in the busy neighborhood, which is sad. The murder of Walter White inspired and motivated the students of East Boston High to root for change in the city of Boston. Less than 24 hours after one initiative hosted by the East Boston High NAACP to thwart gun violence went public, someone shot Walter in cold blood. On September 6th, a known and dangerous gang member was pulled over in a vehicle resembling the one that was seen fleeing the scene. Christopher Moraine was questioned for his involvement or connection to Walter's slaying. Christopher is part of the Fauve Street Gang and has a long and tumultuous list of crimes against him, including shooting a police officer in the arm, which was considered assault and battery, as well as wielding guns, dealing cocaine, and assaulting the mother of his own children. Walter is interred at Oaklawn Cemetery. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS or 1-617-343-4470 with any information. September 7th, 2013. Jody Hargrove enjoyed spending time with family and at the gym. Jody was 43 and the father of a 10, now 20-year-old daughter who divided his time between Boston, Massachusetts, and Virginia. Jody's mom, Betty, said that nobody had problems with Jody. At one point, in 2006, Jody, originally failing to stop for officers, led police officers on a car chase that ended when Jody jumped out of the vehicle at 47 Wayland Street, Roxbury, which resulted in his arrest. Jody was arrested and charged with unlawful possession of a firearm and a number of motor vehicle violations. Jody was also charged with unlawful possession of a .45 firearm and ammunition. Jody obtained his GED. And on the evening of September 7th, 2013, someone shot and killed Jody at 9:43 p.m. at 504 Blue Hill Ave, Roxbury, Mass. This area of Blue Hill Ave is near Castlegate Road. Jody was taken to Boston Medical Center where he was pronounced deceased. At the time of his murder, Jody didn't have a job, but was working in the construction industry before that. Police have yet to disclose the motive of Jody's murder. Please call 1-800-494-TIPS or 1-617-343-4470 with any information. September 14th, 2013. Richard Alequin Hernandez, 25, was a Springfield native who was shot to death alongside with Jose Santiago, 20. The pair were killed in an alleyway near Chestnut Place at the corner of Chestnut and Sargent Street in Holyoke, Mass. The pair were discovered less than 100 feet away from a children's playground at Chestnut Park and between Hampshire and Sargent Streets. Te amo, papa, which means I love you, papa, in Spanish, was a note that was left behind at the memorial to Richard and Jose. That also included balloons, flowers, and messages of love and loss. Multiple weapons were utilized in these shootings. Please call 1-800-322-6940 with any information. September 14th, 2013. Nelson Castillo was shot in a parking lot adjacent to 75 Archdale Road, Roslindale, Mass. at 12:04 a.m. on September 14th, 2013. Nelson had been married with a young daughter named Bienvenido. Please call 1-617-343-4470 with any information. September 21st, 2013. Adriana Nana Bonet, only 25, was born on October 9th, 1987, to parents Ermitaño Bonet and Sol Grisel Franco, and lived on Layford Terrace in Springfield, Massachusetts, with her 4 children. Adriana was shot one time in the abdomen and died coming out of surgery after violent shooters attacked a trio of friends, including Adriana, her friend Jonathan Rosario, and Jaden Pearson. The shooting took place at Armory and Magazine Streets, where MJ's Pizza Place stood, at 955 Worthington Street, Springfield, Mass. Adriana was shot and killed half an hour after the trio argued with a group of men in the parking lot. The men left, and more men, maybe even the same men, nobody has said anything to police, dressed in red, arrived about 35 feet away. One of the men opened fire, shooting at the trio about a dozen times, striking Adriana in her torso under her left arm. Jonathan was struck in the back, and Jayton being grazed by a bullet. The 3 assailants ran to a waiting white Toyota, seen speeding away towards the Springfield Technical Community College. Adriana's murder occurred only yards away from Magazine Park. A makeshift memorial was erected in Adriana's honor, which contained candles, handwritten notes, and messages in chalk on the ground. Adriana is buried in Forest Dale Cemetery. Please call 1-413-787-6355 with any information. September 21st, 2013. I could be on the other side of the world, and he'd be there in 2 minutes, because he was that kind of hero. Brandon Daniels was the son of Joanne Daniels and Larry McCauley, born on September 21st, 1995. Brandon was the brother to Larry, Maurice, Brian, Deja, Lanisha, Kenya, and Tasha, and had a son of his own, named Brandon D. Daniels, Jr., and 2 daughters, LaBrea Daniels and Jazira Daniels. Brandon lived on James Street and was employed at the Six Corners neighborhood Dunkin' Donuts, and was a member of the Shiloh Church of God in Christ. Brandon was, by all accounts, a good father, someone who always wanted to help, someone who was funny, a talented singer and artist. You could never tell if Brandon was unhappy. He never let anything ruffle his feathers. Brandon once pleaded guilty to criminal contempt for not answering questions related to a murder case, and was sentenced to 141 days in Hampton County Correctional Center in Ludlow, Mass. Brandon refused to testify because he thought that his life would be in danger if he did. The people that Brandon was supposed to testify against pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter charges. After having a brief confrontation with a group of men in front of La Favorita Mini-Mart and Bodega on Walnut Street in Springfield, Mass, at 10 p.m. on September 21st, 2013, some jerk, some lowlife, some person shot Brandon multiple times. Friends and family erected a shrine to Brandon. Police have not released a motive. Please call 1-413-787-6355 with any information. October 2nd, 2013. Dominga Carvalho had her 3 sons snatched away from her through gun violence over the years. Gun violence is no joke, and for an innocent person to be the target is wrong. Leroy Carvalho was one of the nicest and most down-to-earth people you could ever meet. You never heard his name with thugs or creeps. Leroy was the son of Dominga and Louis Carvalho. Leroy wanted to move up in his career and raise his family. Leroy was working at the Fairmont Copley Plaza Boston Hotel and was working 80 hours per week looking for another job for his son. Just going to work and going home, causing trouble for nobody and providing for his family. Leroy was gunned down, celebrating his birthday. On October 2nd, 2013, the last words exchanged by mom and son were, "Happy birthday." Leading up to the night of his birthday, Leroy requested the 2 days surrounding his birthday off, and it was all he talked about for the month leading up to the event. At 10:15 p.m., at Albion and Clifton in Dorchester, Mass., Leroy and several others were standing in front of his girlfriend's parents' house drinking Remy Martin champagne to celebrate his birthday, when a black Chrysler Sebring with 2 occupants and a white Ford SUV with 2 occupants with tinted windows were spotted, as well as a black male in his early 20s, now early 30s. That man was caught fleeing the scene on foot, wearing a dark hoodie and gray sweatpants. 6 shots were fired in total, according to one witness, with at least one of those shots striking Leroy in the head. I looked up, and blood was gushing from his head like water, said Leroy Teixeira. Everyone ducked for cover, and therefore nobody saw the clear identity of the people responsible. 1 round of gunfire went 3 blocks before being stopped by a structure on West Cottage Street. Leroy is not the first of his family members taken by gun violence. Leroy is predeceased by his 2 brothers, Louis, who was slain in 2000, and Christopher, who was shot, paralyzed for 4.5 years, and eventually succumbed to his wounds in 2003. All 3 brothers were taken by mysterious assailants. Leroy's aunt, Ijara Mendez, is a peace activist whose 2 sons, Leroy's cousins, were also murdered by unknown persons. One cousin, Bobby, was stabbed to death in 1995, and his other cousin, Alex, was taken by gunfire in 2006 near where Bobby was killed. There was a 5:30 p.m. walk for peace days later, and a charity walk held for Leroy that began at the B2 section of the Boston Police Department and went to the Boston Police Headquarters. Unlike many of these cases, police are forthcoming, as in, they know the identity of the killer, and so does Marcelina, Leroy's sister, who runs into the alleged killer in the community frequently. Leroy is buried in Cape Verde, where his mom and his siblings came from for a better life, only to find heartache and misery. Leroy is interred at New Calvary Cemetery. Police think that there was some talk in the Cape Verdean community before the shooting occurred and after the shooting occurred, and that several people could hold valuable information. Please call 1-617-3 1-617-343-9018, 1-617-343-9014, or email bpd-homicide@pd.boston.gov with any information. October 5th, 2013. Hakeem Ox Powell was born on June 15th, 1980, and was a graduate of the High School of Science and Technology. Hakeem was into martial arts, basketball, and music. Hakeem was predeceased by his mother Catherine and his aunt Linda. Hakeem himself left behind his father Edward, sister Fakisha, fiancée Kiana, and 2 children, Aikacia and Nylasia, as well as a bunch of nieces and nephews. I'm not going to mince any words right now. This is gang-related, said Springfield Mayor Dominic Sarno, also stating that this was a, quote, in-your-face type of incident that occurred. Hakeem Powell had a long history with police. And on the day of October 5th, 2013, Hakeem was walking down the street with a friend, and may have been in the process of a drug deal, when he was gunned down. The friend walking with Hakeem was taken into custody for an outstanding warrant. The case of who shot Hakeem went cold for about 2 years before police leveled that Jean Carlos Mercado was responsible for Hakeem's murder. The police shot spotter reported between 7 to 8 gunshots in the general area that day, and witnesses claimed that Jean walked off the porch at 79 Quincy Street at 7th Street in Springfield, Massachusetts at about 2 p.m. and fatally shot Hakeem in the forehead and thigh over a dispute between the 2 men stemming from days before, when Hakeem beat the snot out of Jean. Hakeem had been bigger, stronger, and faster than Jean. Hakeem's family put Jean on blast and claimed that he was the one to murder Hakeem. And to top it off, Jean's baby mama, as she was referred to in the sources I found, bought Jean a one-way ticket to Alaska. Jean left for Alaska and came back, acting like nothing ever happened. Hakeem's murder prompted an increase in police presence in the high-crime stretch of Union Street between Hancock and Oak Street. Jean went to trial for murder, carrying a firearm without a license, and illegal possession of ammo and discharging a firearm within 500 feet of a building. The defense maintained that neither witness was credible and said that the jury shouldn't believe that they witnessed the shooting in the way they claimed. People were around during the time of the shooting, but, like in most cases that I cover, they didn't come forward. A 16-year-old testified they saw Hakeem run away from Jean 10 to 15 feet, then testified he walked, not ran, and it was a shorter distance than initially testified. The witnesses only gave up information because they were being charged for unrelated offenses. Deliberation of the case took from 10 a.m. to 4:15 p.m. In the jury trial, Jean was found not guilty of killing Hakeem. It was the inconsistencies with the main witness's testimony that undid the work of the prosecution. In the jury trial, Jean was found not guilty of killing Hakeem. It was the inconsistencies with the main witness testimony that undid the work of the prosecution. Jean was released after spending 586 days in jail for a crime he was found to have ultimately not committed. If you or someone you know has any information as to the murder of Hakeem Powell, please call 1-413-787-6355. October 7th, 2013. Dane Breer Angelic was 34 in 2013 and will be 44 this year. Dane was last seen in Cumberland County, Maine, living homeless on the streets. Dane is a 5'11" white male with short, dark brown hair when last seen and brown eyes. Dane has a curved scar on his left wrist and no known tattoos. Dane was last seen at about 3:30 p.m. near the Preble Street Resource Center, located at 5 Portland Street in Portland, Maine. Dane also goes by the alias Lauren Reardon Breer. Please call 1-207-874-8575, 1-207-874-8584, or text PPDME to 847411. October 17th, 2013. There are discrepancies with everything about this case, including who the victim is. In researching, I found this name Carlos Beltri, aged 24, killed on October 17th, 2013, on Humboldt Ave near Seaver Street at 9:26 p.m. I also found resources saying the victim's name was Jose Lopez. Regardless of who they were shot in the back by a coward with a gun, and police don't know who killed them. Police discovered a dark blue SUV with a dented rear panel parked halfway inside a bus stop at 280 Humboldt Ave. The victim was pronounced deceased at Boston Medical Center. No other information is available. Please call 1-617-343-4470 with any information. October 19th, 2013. Jocelyn Garcia Gonzalez is 5'2" and about 130 pounds, and was only 17 when she vanished from Springfield, Mass. Jocelyn is Hispanic and had shoulder-length brown hair and brown eyes when last seen. No comparisons have been made, and no other information is available. Please call 413-787-6355 with any information. October 29th, 2013. Troy Mays Jesurum was a 26-year-old black male who was slain on De Gautier Way in Roxbury, Mass. on October 29th, 2013. No other information is available. Please call 1-617-343-6455 with any information. November 12th, 2013. Varelis Perea was a 4-year-old who was slain, murdered, by unnamed means on Washington Street in Boston's South End on November 12th, 2013. Like most of these cases, there is no other information available, and for this one of a 4-year-old, I am deeply and truly disturbed that not more action has been taken to figure out who murdered a 4-year-old. Please call 1-617-343-4250 with any information. November 28th, 2013. Nikki Valson is a 5'9", 210 black man who is missing from Stamford, Connecticut. Nick's family hasn't heard from him since November of 2013. Nikki is bald and his eyes are brown. Nikki wore glasses. No comparisons have been made, and no other information is available. Please call 1-203-977-4444 with any information. November 16th, 2013. Not one bad bone in his body, said Ron, cousin of Andrew Andy McGee. Andy was 19, born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, lived with his mom Delia, and was an only child. And as a child, Delia kept Andy off the streets and out of trouble. And as a young adult, Andy enjoyed basketball and was close to his family. At 10:52 on November 16th, 2013, someone shot Andy in front of his 7 to 8 Whitman Street home as he was chilling with his 19-year-old cousin Ron, who was visiting from out of town, who was also struck by the bullets. Andy was taken to Boston Medical Center and pronounced deceased. Witnesses claimed several shots were fired in rapid succession near Norfolk Street in Dorchester, Mass. that day. Please call 1-617-343-4470 with any information. December 7th, 2013. Scott S. Ledger is sweet, thoughtful, loving, and disappeared at the age of 41. He will be 51 this year. At the time he vanished, Scott was raising his son, his nephew, and his girlfriend's son. Scott is white, 5'4", 150 to 160 pounds, with short, buzzed on the side brown hair, chest hair, green eyes, and several days' worth of stubble when last seen. He could be clean-shaven right now, though. Scott has a vertical scar about 6 inches long on the right side of his back. Scott grew up in the Fitchburg, Massachusetts area and has ties to the local area still. When last seen, Scott was wearing a hunter green jacket with a brown collar, blue jeans, a Red Sox hat, and brown work boots. In March of 2013, Scott was released from jail for a disorderly conduct charge. Scott was last seen at 1109 Petersham Road in Athol, Massachusetts, storming away from his girlfriend's residence on foot at about 9 p.m. on December 7th, 2013, after having an argument with his girlfriend. Danielle Marcoux, the girlfriend who threatened to call the cops for being intoxicated, Scott had a warrant out for his arrest for a minor criminal case and opted to not remain in the area to potentially be arrested. Scott was intoxicated at the time of his departure and didn't have a license to drive. Scott didn't have a car or a cell phone, had about $40, and it was a bitterly cold 16 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Danielle Marcoux reported Scott missing on December 11th, 2013, 4 days after he was last seen. 3 sets of police and tracking dogs, 2 searches with police and fire, were conducted where they scoured the woods in the local surrounding area of Scott's last known whereabouts. They also interviewed witnesses, and yet they couldn't find Scott. Massachusetts State Trooper and dog Dano helped search through 10-plus acres where Scott enjoyed fishing. Police are quite certain at this point that Scott is not in the woods surrounding his girlfriend's house. Scott's sister, Heidi Antunes, also came to the aid to search. I told my husband I want to go home right now. Right now! We ended up leaving everything we owned. We brought back 2 bags of luggage, and that's it. Heidi and her husband gave up most of their worldly possessions 6 months after moving to Hawaii. They whittled it down to 2 suitcases and moved back to Massachusetts to participate in the search for Scott. Scott's other sister, Michelle Gingras, said that Scott checked in on her every day after her divorce. And other sister, Kristen Ledger LeBlanc, said that he was a very devoted brother. One place that Scott has not been seen is picking up his medications that he needs to maintain his mood. Without medication, Scott won't act like himself. He has a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression, though the medication isn't for those disorders specifically. Scott can survive without his medication, but would likely be disoriented. Scott either met an end due to the elements, or foul play was involved. 3 exclusions have been made in the time since Scott seemingly disappeared into the universe. One in Bland, Virginia, on August 14th, 2015. One in Cuyahoga, Ohio, on May 23rd, 2014. And one on Virginia Beach on March 28th, 2015. Please call 1-978-249-3232 if you have any information on the disappearance or whereabouts of Scott Ledger. December 31st, 2013. Lawrence Forbes McIntosh left home at 6 to 6:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve to grab party supplies, and made plans like nothing was wrong. However, Lawrence never returned from that trip to his home in Windsor Locks, Connecticut. Lawrence is white, 5 foot 10 inches, 245 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Lawrence was 52 and will be 62 this year. Lawrence was last seen wearing white sneakers with blue jeans and a gray jacket. Lawrence left in his car, wearing his wedding ring, had his keys and wallet, none of which have been recovered. On January 2nd, 2014, in East Windsor, Connecticut, at 100 Bridge Street, at the Rite Aid in Geisler's Plaza, Lawrence's 2004 silver Suzuki with the license plate 852FED was impounded by Windsor Locks Police Department. A silver alert was issued for Lawrence. In Connecticut, a silver alert can pertain to a missing child under 18 years old or a missing person between 18 and 65 who has mental health issues, or for someone who is over 65. In Lawrence's case, he was under emotional distress, and police think that it is highly likely that Lawrence tried to harm himself. If you have seen Lawrence McIntosh, please call 1-860-627-1461, extension 158. If you have any questions, complaints, or concerns about the podcast you encountered here today, please message me at minepodcast@gmail.com. That's mine with 2 M's, 2 I's, 1 N, 1 E at gmail.com. And thank you so much for listening. Later, y'all.